Hello, this is Mad Hatter, and I'm here in a Skyblock world to explain to you how mob spawning actually works in Bedrock Edition. My goal here is to give you tools to design your own farms if you want to. Designing farms is not for everybody. Some people like to follow tutorials, but even if you are following tutorials, these mechanics can help you identify a good farm from a bad one without even testing. This is not going to be 100% complete. If you know something that is wrong, let me know. It's not intentional, and it would increase my knowledge. But I want to make it clear, Java and Bedrock have completely different spawning mechanics, and the mechanics you may have seen in a Java player's video may conflict with these, and that doesn't mean that they're bad at Minecraft. It means they're making assumptions based upon experiences with a different game. Remember, Java Edition and Bedrock Edition are completely different games that share almost no common code. So it's dangerous to transfer assumptions from Java to Bedrock without completely testing. One thing that we should talk about before we get started, if you are bored with mechanics, at least skip to the end and consider watching the things I avoid to prevent hurting your server. I should have markers in the description. These are things that can harm the server, and I personally do not think are worth the rates. First, we should talk about ticking. In Bedrock, there are several settings for this. The most common setting is 4. If you'd like me to do a section on 6, 8, 10, and 12, let me know. Most people stick to Sim 4, and Sim 4 is a strange one. It doesn't match any other Sim version, so I'll be only talking about Sim 4 in this video. What does Sim 4 mean? Let's start by looking at the Sim 4 pattern. To do this, you can download the pack I linked in the description and place an armor stand with a stick in its hand. This will bring up all of the ticking regions and a handy compass. The border just outside the number 4 is the edge. Past that, no redstone or mob AI tasks will run unless somebody uses an exploit to force that chunk to tick. The armor stand represents the player's location. It's not actually the ticking area. It is to show you where your ticking area would end up. Generally, things that happen each tick only impact things in this region. Things like despawning are done based upon ticking mobs. For that reason, Sim 4 uses a different despawning algorithm than any other sim distance. Sim 4 spawns mobs only out to 44 blocks around the player, randomly despawns mobs after 32 blocks, and will not spawn mobs closer than 24 blocks from the player. If you want to see what this looks like, simply give an armor stand a plank, and we can see the spawning sphere. Now, the reason for the R44 is to prevent monsters from spawning and then ending up immediately in unloaded chunks. So from the pack, you can see the colored circle starting at 24, ending at 44 with an opaque line at 32 blocks. This is to show you the areas that you can expect monsters to spawn, randomly despawn, and instant despawn while you're playing. In Bedrock, each tick a chunk is chosen that that chunk will attempt to spawn a mob. It first checks global mob cap, then checks density caps, and then chooses a block. The game then starts at the top of the world, going down trying to spawn a mob. It checks block types, light level, and then tries to put a mob in the northwest corner of the block and checks for collisions. If all of those checks pass, it places a mob there and attempts to pack spawn. If the mob definition in the behavior pack allows for it, it will pack spawn. Yeah, even the vanilla Minecraft has a behavior pack, and you can download it from Mojang, or you can find a copy on Bedrock.dev. Those people are awesome. Link's going to be in the description for their website. They're a great tool if you're trying to learn how to make packs like I do. That's where I learned most of what I know. As I was saying, the algorithm starts at the top and goes to the bottom. Some people ask, does this mean that mob spawning is faster up high? No, Bedrock doesn't have Y-based spawning probability. The probability is uniform in the X and Z, and the mobs will be placed first at the top and last at the bottom. So build your farm where you'd like. It's just easier to build it up high, and it really doesn't impact the rates. Building the mob up high or down low only impacts the spawn proofing effort. Unlike Java, the Bedrock has several different types of mob caps. In my opinion, this is why the passive mob spawning works on Bedrock worlds, but doesn't work on Java worlds. So to start with, we have global mob cap. Global mob cap in Bedrock is 200. I would love to see developers allow us to adjust this, just like sim distance or render distance based upon our server performance. However, we are hard capped at 200 regardless how awesome your server or computer is. Not all entities count towards global mob cap. Notably, villagers don't count to the 200 global. However, named mobs, bred mobs, persistent mobs all do count towards global mob cap. Next, we have density checks. Density checks are there to ensure that not all 200 monsters are hostile mob cave spawns at the bottom of the world, preventing other mobs from spawning. This keeps the total number of mobs per player lower and is intended to evenly distribute mobs around the ticking areas. Each mob has their own density checks as well as a type of mob spawning density check. We're going to start with what is a density. Unlike the diamond pattern we see for ticking areas, density checks are rectangular, counting all mobs in the chunk starting where the monster spawns, going out 4 chunks from the monster, excluding the chunk the monster is in. Don't worry, we have a way to visualize that too. We take an armor stand where we think the mob will spawn, and then put a chest in the armor stand's hand. That chest will display the area that the mob counts right as it is about to spawn to determine if that monster can spawn, and how many of each type of monster are in the density. Each monster has its own density cap plus a spawn type density. I won't be covering the per monster densities as they change from time to time, but the spawn types generally are hostile surface, hostile cave, passive surface, passive cave, ambient surface, and ambient cave. As of 1.18, the hostile cave cap has increased from 8 to 16. The hostile surface cap is 8, and the passive surface cap is 4, as well as the passive cave cap. That means when the game is spawning a monster, it counts to see if there are already monsters in that region that can be counted in the specific density that they're trying to spawn. So now this is where a lot of people get confused. You have to spawn proof the area around where the monster spawns, not necessarily around where the player's at. Oftentimes covering the ticking region will cover the monster density, especially if the monster is spawning above your head. But I'll repeat it. Monsters that you have loaded outside of your ticking area count towards mob cap and can prevent spawning. You have to spawn proof the density, not just the ticking area. We talked about surface cap and cave cap, passive and hostile caps before, but we didn't talk about what makes a mob a cave mob versus a surface mob. This gets a little bit complex. To start with, we'll talk about a monster that spawns with nothing but air above its head or leaves. This goes to the top of the world. These are going to be surface cap. Generally, this is the easiest cap to understand. Monsters that spawn with access to the sky are surface cap. In addition, monsters that spawn out of a spawner, regardless as if they have blocks above their head, are surface spawn. That's right. The cave spider spawner you found at the bottom of the world, that makes surface cap cave spiders. That may be confusing, but spawners always make surface cap monsters. Structure spawns are always cave spawns, regardless of the type of block over their head. So if you don't know what a structure spawn is, we'll get into that later. Mobs that spawn naturally, that didn't come from a spawner, but spawn with a block over their head, are cave spawns. And finally, the converted mobs. These are cave mobs. For instance, a slime that is broken into little slimes. The big slime may have been a surface slime, but the little ones, those are cave slimes. This is why open air slime farms are so much better than cave slime farms. Because the surface slimes, when they're hurt, turn into cave slimes and immediately open up a spot for another surface slime to spawn. Converted drown spawns are also cave, as well as converted villagers. For passive mobs, any passive mob that you breed will be a cave passive mob. Any naturally spawning mobs on the surface are surface passive mobs. So if you're looking to allow cows, sheep, chickens, mushrooms in your area, and you want some bred animals, you should breed the original wild ones and kill them and keep the babies. The babies will be cave, and the adults that you murdered were surface, and that allows new surface mobs to spawn after you killed the 2 adults. Structure spawns are different. They're monsters that spawn at a specific building in the world. They are strange compared to other monsters. Some example of structure spawns include withers, skeletons, guardians, blaze, the ones that don't come from spawners, witches that spawn in the witch hut, pillagers that spawn in the pillager outpost. And I think that is, at the time of writing, all of the structure spawns, but I might be wrong. In Bedrock, they spawn on a specific block in the structure. For Guardian spawn spots, see my other video on the topic using this same pack. For other structure spawns that are predictable, see the wiki on the pack, or I may put out videos on those in due time. For the Nether Fortress, I'll need to think about how to support those in this pack. I have not come up with a good solution yet, but I'll tell you that Dr. Jan Cyan has a really good video explaining fortress farms. I don't know them. However, that's where I learned, so I'll point you there. These structure spawn spots are generally 1 spot per chunk per structure. The spawning method is different and can be a bit confusing. This is where I'm a bit shaky in my knowledge, but I'll do my best to explain this. The first thing that is weird is that a structure spawn occurs after all of the natural spawns, and they get 1 additional cap space in the cave cap. But for a spawn of a monster to occur in the spawn spot, a similar spawn must have been attempted and failed. Again, this is based upon inference from what I see working, but it makes sense to me. So, for instance, for a witch to spawn, a surface hostile mob spawn must have occurred, but failed in that tick for a witch to, or a pack of witches to spawn. This is why you need to have a chunk that is dry for a witch farm to function. In the case of a fortress farm, any hostile mob spawn to occur or fail in the chunk for the chunk to spawn a structure spawn. In the case of guardians, things are very strange. It seems that you need to have a surface aquatic mob spawn attempt for a pack spawn to occur at the highest water block in the spawning column. For the pillagers, you need a hostile surface mob attempt to occur, and if it fails due to light, it will still allow the structure spawn to occur. Again, I apologize if this is confusing. There seems to be a lot of ifs and buts in the structure spawning algorithm that make it hard to get your head around, but it's important. Takeaways are you need to have a spawn attempt occur of the specific mob types for each structure spawn. Wet for guardians, dry for most others, and those occur on 1 block per chunk. So you really want to make a large area around that is spawn proofed for these to occur. let's talk about slimes. Slimes can randomly spawn on the surface in swamps or in slime chunks below y=40. All Bedrock seeds use the same seed for the slime chunk generation, so they're not randomly distributed like they are in Java. In this pack, you can see slime chunks if you put a Nautilus shell in your offhand. So now that we have covered how spawning works, we should cover some of the safeguards on the world and how some people have exploited those safeguards in ways that can harm your world. I'm not going to say that these should be banned or never used, but what I'm saying is there are ways to work around them, and they work very well. They don't circumvent the safeguards of Minecraft, and I'd prefer that. The first and most scary example is the dual dimension farm. Dual dimension farms send monsters directly into the nether to get them out of mobcap instantly. In Java, this is not as scary because Java force loads the nether when something goes through the nether portal. And this allows mobs to be killed before they pile up in the nether. In Bedrock, it just writes the mob to the save file in that location. This can cause mobs to rapidly build up and potentially break your server when you enter the nether. These types of farms can and do break servers and cause rollbacks. I would avoid them completely. They cannot be reliably AFK'd, and if you choose to AFK them and one player disconnects and the server simply rolls back, and it's not worth the risk. Portal and taking portal gold farms are a type of farm that don't respect global mob cap, and they don't turn off to protect the server. Even with only one dimension, you can end up overloading the server. I wouldn't recommend using them in your world simply because there are a few zombie piglin-based nether-only gold farms that will get you more than a stack of blocks per hour of AFK. They're not too bad to build, and they are fast enough, in my opinion. If Mojang checked the global mob cap before spawning piglins out of the portals, I wouldn't complain about these farms much, but I don't like that they do not check global mob cap. Speaking of other types of farms that don't check global mob cap, spawners do not check global mob cap. They check the area directly around them, and a spawner can overrun the server if you don't have a killing mechanism that's reliable on them. I'd recommend using them until you can get a general mob farm up or a better XP source. They're not long-term solutions, but they are really easy to get you started. I know a lot of people will be unhappy with that comment, but really there are better XP sources out there, and they're not terribly hard to build. I would recommend only using these until you can get away with a different farm. If the Trident Killer stops and you're AFK, you can lag the server out and cause a rollback for your server mates. Early game, they are awesome, but I would move away from them as your world progresses. Well, that's all I have for today. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, leave a like. If you want more, please subscribe. If you want early information or you want to help out, join the Discord. Anyway, this has been Hatter, and bye!